Everyone, Deepak Saini here from deepaksanihealth.com and personalbluezones.com. So I had recently done a blog post, maybe a month ago or so, on a book review called Supersized Lies by Robert Davis. And he was going to do an interview. I had some questions for him on the book, and we're going to do an interview. So the book is I got an advanced copy, so I was able to read it before, and it actually is going to be released here in a couple weeks, end of September 2021. So we had it all set up, but unfortunately he got very busy and he's kind of doing the pre circuit to promote the book, etc. But I had sent him some questions in advance, and he graciously answered those questions. So I'm going to post it as a written as well. But I thought I'd do a little video as well because the intent was to have an interview, a video interview with him. So just a little bit about the author. Robert J. Davis, PhD, is an award-winning health journalist whose work has appeared on CNN, PBS, WebMD, and the Wall Street Journal. He's the author of 3 previous books on health. He hosts the Healthy Skeptic video series, you can look that up, which dissects the science behind popular health claims. Davis holds an undergraduate degree from Princeton University, a master's degree in public health from Emory University's Rawlings School of Public Health, and a PhD in health policy from Brandeis University, where he was the Pew Foundation Fellow. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the questions that I had for him and then his responses, and then maybe add a little extra commentary, because if we were doing an interview, that's what I would have done, right? So, question number 1 I had from: how did you get interested in doing the type of research you do and the topics you cover? So his response was: since college, I've been passionate about personal health and wellness. I'm a fitness enthusiast and paid careful attention to what I eat. Professionally, I've worked many years as a health journalist and have academic training in public health. So in my work, I combine my personal passion with my educational background to sift through research and help people understand what the science actually shows so they can make more informed decisions. Okay, great. My second question was, in the introduction chapter, you discuss biases that people, including scientists, have, and certainly myself included. So my question is, what are your biases? And this was his response. So he said, first of all, great question. One bias that I believe in is research and put little stock in anecdotal observations and opinions as ways to evaluate the effectiveness of health-related interventions. While I recognize that scientific research is not perfect, it's the best tool in the history of humankind to get us closer to the truth about what benefits our health and what doesn't. The key is to know how to interpret it properly, which includes distinguishing among studies. Not all are created equal, and looking at what scientists call the totality of the evidence rather than fixating on individual studies. So, and he has another bias, but let's unpack this one a little bit so number 1, yeah, for sure, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, etc., gold standard. But that being said, and I would have challenged the author as well on just like even the top tier studies can't control for every variable there's out there. There's literally like hundreds, if not thousands, of variables that can affect a study. So we try our best and interpret it thus far. So I mean, I think that's one thing. We can't put, they're good, but you can't put everything into it. Secondly, I don't think you can, in my personal opinion, and this is one of my biases, I guess, I don't think you can discount anecdotal evidence when there's literally hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people telling you the same thing. Everyone's different, everyone's unique, everyone's going to respond to different modalities differently, but when you have n equals 1 studies, but thousands of them, I think that accounts for something, and that's something that needs to be looked into and accounted for. And then the author goes on to say about his other bias. Another bias I have is that I view obesity and weight management through the lens of health. While some see it largely as a cosmetic issue, example, how do I lose 30 pounds so I look good for an upcoming event, I view weight management as a matter of improving our health and well-being and evaluating weight control measures based on their ability to achieve these ends, both short and long term. I think that's the right way to look at it. That's how I look at it too. I don't even know if that's really a bias per se. I think that's really just the way you got to look at it. But I suppose it could be interpreted as a bias. So the next question I had was, how do you think things got out of control regarding weight gain? And I prefaced that, feel free to throw any organizations or people under the proverbial bus, if you will. He chose not to do that, which is fine. So his response is, I think it's a combination of factors. Certainly the ambiguity of food plays a role. Seemingly everywhere we go, from the office to the airport, there's food available, and the portions served by many restaurants are too large. The food industry has also played a role, flooding the market with highly processed foods, which are more likely to promote weight gain, and bombarding us with advertising to promote them. In some cases, these processed foods are misleadingly portrayed as weight friendly, so we can end up eating even more of them and paradoxically making the problem worse. Finally, as he argues in the book, I think bad advices contribute to the obesity epidemic by pushing methods such as fad diets. They may result in short-term weight loss, but ultimately lead to even greater weight gain. So let me unpack that one a bit. I think the food advertising, especially processed foods, I think what did he say here? Some cases are misleading. I would argue almost all cases are misleading for sure. I mean, the food guidelines or the labeling guidelines, what I mean to say, are totally a bunch of bunk, and they don't serve anyone. And I think I think policy going back many years, I've talked about this before, has really led to the poor choices and the dogma that people believe for the last 40-50 years. And again, I was kind of hoping, and maybe if we were doing this live, even though he didn't want to answer it, I maybe would have pushed him a bit on it. But I certainly think, and I've talked about this before, a lot of poor policy and vested interests that have led to where we are today in many health issues, including weight gain and et cetera. And maybe just a little plug here for my upcoming interview on the authors on my latest blog post on a different book review, which I think will maybe get more into calling some people out. But anyway, that's an aside for now. My next question was, one of the myths discussed in the book is weight loss is contagious. I liken it to the saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Can you elaborate? So he said, research suggests that if our friends, family members, or significant others become obese, we're more likely to become obese as well. Conversely, we're more likely to lose weight if people close to us are doing so. One reason that our behaviors tend to mirror those of people around us, often in ways we're not aware of, what we consider a normal or acceptable weight gain may go up or down. Weight may go up or down depending on the weights of people around us. So again, I think he basically validated what I said, that you're kind of the average of the 5 people you hang out with. If your circle of friends are going to go start doing XYZ program or XYZ exercise or activity, you're more likely to tag along and have the benefits. Conversely, if they're going to partake in unhealthy activities, you're more likely to do that as well. So I truly believe that you're kind of the average of the people you hang out with. So you got to hang out with maybe better people, or people who are more aligned with your goals, whether they be health, business related, or what have you. My next question was, you discussed the limitations of BMI. What would be a better, while still accessible, measure or metric? And I think the keyword there is accessible. So he says, there's no ideal alternative to BMI, which is why we continue to rely on it so heavily, despite its shortcomings. One alternative is weight circumference, which research suggests may be better than BMI for estimating body fatness and assessing disease risk. The general rule of thumb is that men should have a waist of no more than 40 inches and non-pregnant women no more than 35 inches. But there's debate about whether these thresholds apply to all ethnic and racial groups. So I like the last part. Number one, I think there is some nuance there when it comes to different ethnicities and cultures, etc. And again, that prefaced with accessibility, because I think BMI, there's tools, and I'm not going to get into them here. You can certainly reach out to me if you want to know. There are better tools for assessing health and weight and body composition, etc., but they're not necessarily accessible. BMI is like just a calculation. It's very, very simple. So in the preface of the question I asked about accessibility, I think he answered the best he could, but I think BMI is ultimately a terrible measure, but it is accessible. So in my book review, I mentioned what a great idea it was for a person to track where they were, who they were with, and what they were doing while they were having their meals. Why do you think this is so important? His response was, we're often unaware of how our surroundings influence what and how much we eat. Perhaps you eat more when you're alone than when you're with a group of people, for example, or maybe you tend to consume more junk food when you eat in the car or in a hurry. By keeping a journal that tracks such information, you can gain greater awareness of your eating patterns and change your behavior accordingly. So the reason I put this question in was because when I was reading the book, and that was just really a kind of aha moment. So when I have my clients do their food log at the beginning of our relationship, I do have some qualitative questions that I'd like them to fill out as well. But I never really had anything in this regard as far as like who you're with, or how are you feeling when you were eating, or what state of mind you're in, etc. So this really brought that to the forefront. So I've actually now incorporated that into my food tracking form to just get a better sense, because certainly you can get a sense of how people are feeling, maybe even how they're sleeping, bowel movements, etc., based on what they ate. But I think that maybe that was a missing piece that I had that, again, I'm going to incorporate now of, the context of when they were eating, who they were with, etc., might lead to the choices that they did eat. So I think that makes it a more complete picture. So again, I've incorporated that now. Go forward. So my next question was, you mentioned that there's no single best diet for everyone. I totally agree with that. Can you explain some of the nuances that could help people choose one way of eating over another? And his response was, any number of diets from keto to paleo to intermittent fasting can be effective in the short term for weight loss and help kickstart people's efforts. But what really matters is how sustainable the diet is over the long run, which is where the vast majority fall short. What's also important is how healthful the diet is. An eating plan that restricts things like fruits, vegetables, whole grain, beans, or other nutrient-packed foods can deprive your body of nutrients it needs and undermine your health. So let's unpack this one a bit. So number one, yes, it's got to be sustainable for sure, regardless of what it ends up being. Again, working with my clients, we try to make small incremental steps. We try to make a lifestyle change, not a quick one-off hit, lose X in X time or anything like that. I also think here, and the author didn't really touch on it, nor does he in the book, but I think, again, there's nuance. There's genetics. There's sensitivities, etc. So when those come into play or taken into account, there might be foods or whole food categories that you might want to be careful with or even restrict altogether. So again, the book doesn't get into that. I certainly would have brought that point up in our interview if it was able to go through. But I think there is the nuance there with people down at a lower level, at a DNA level, at a gene level, that needs to be taken into account. And I think many people don't do that. So in some cases, it might be very well validated to eliminate whole foods or certain foods altogether. But again, you got to work with the person, with all the data, and what is sustainable for them long term. My next question: from going through the book, I get a sense of what you believe or follow in regards to nutrition, but you never officially state it. So my question: how do you eat? So Robert's response was, I try to practice what I preach, eating a whole foods diet that's relatively high in fiber, low in sugar, and has plenty of protein, with foods such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, beans, fish, and chicken. In addition, I try to minimize junk foods and sweets, though that doesn't mean I never eat things like ice cream, chips, or cookies. I just make them occasional treats and enjoy them in limited amounts. So I'm glad he clarified that one, because I got a sense from the book, although he did mention, as he mentioned in his response here, fish and chicken like very briefly. I almost got the sense that the author was vegan or vegetarian. So I just wanted to clarify. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But it is quite interesting that he's absent. He does talk red meat. So I would have maybe in an interview, I would have maybe pushed him on that, or not pushed him, but asked him that about his thoughts on red meat, and if there's a reason why he doesn't eat red meat or whatever. Maybe we would have had a debate on that, because I don't think there's anything wrong with well-sourced red meat, ethically raised, grass-finished, et cetera, which I've talked about before. So anyway, that's his answers there. Again, I really enjoyed the book. Again, in my review, I suggest you check it out at deepaksanihealth.com or personalbluezones.com as we get a little bit more into my thoughts on the book and what have you. Again, it was very focused on sort of the weight loss aspect of the myths and lies in the health there, not on necessarily the overall health. Again, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of the myths that the author unpacks that in the context of weight loss, I don't disagree with, but in the context of maybe overall health or a broader picture of health, then I think, it misses the mark a little bit. But again, in the context of the book, it made sense. of weight loss. So anyway, that's my my quick review or my interview, I guess, of the answers. And again, maybe at some point, I hope I will get to interview the author live. But I mean, he did graciously offer his responses to my questions. So yeah, so that's what they are. So anyway. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Happy to hear any comments or questions you might have that I could answer for you or pass along to the author, even if that's the case. DeepakSeniHealth.com and personalbluezones.com. Till next time, take care.